She didn't just put you in the friend zone, she built a cage around you, piece by piece, using your own kindness as the bars. You thought you were laying the foundations of a relationship. In reality, you were just a willing laborer in the construction of your own irrelevance. It wasn't a rejection, it was a strategic demotion. She assessed your value, extracted what she needed: validation, attention, emotional support, and then filed you away under harmless utility. You weren't a man to her. You were a resource, a convenient, predictable, and utterly unthreatening source of comfort she could tap into whenever her primary targets were unavailable. You waited for the text that never came. You replayed every conversation, desperately searching for the mistake you made, the wrong turn you took. But your mistake wasn't in a single word or action. Your mistake was your entire strategy. You approached the battlefield of attraction armed with surrender flags, hoping she would admire your peaceful nature. You failed to understand that respect is never granted, it is seized. Attraction is not a reward for good behavior. It is a primal response to power. You were the reliable one. The one she called to complain about the men who actually stirred something inside her. The ones who were challenging, unpredictable. The ones who had a world of their own that did not revolve around her. You listened. You offered advice. You were the perfect shoulder to cry on, believing that your emotional servitude would one day be promoted to intimacy. What a fatal miscalculation. Digging your own grave with a spoon of niceness. Each time you dropped everything for her last-minute request, you communicated that your time had no value. Each time you validated her every complaint without challenge, you communicated that your opinion was malleable. Each time you placed her needs above your own ambitions, you screamed to the world, and more importantly, to her, that your own life was a secondary concern. The great philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer wrote that a man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free. Sacrificed your solitude, your freedom, your very self, on the altar of her approval. You abandoned your own kingdom in the desperate hope that she might let you be a court jester in hers. And she, following the most basic, brutal instinct of human nature, felt nothing but contempt for the king who so willingly gave up his own throne. Think back to the exact moment the verdict was delivered. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It was worse. It was casual. It was delivered with a smile, a light touch on the arm. "You're such a great friend." 3 words that felt like a death sentence. In that moment, the entire structure of your hopes collapsed into dust. You saw it in her eyes. Not malice, but a complete and total lack of romantic consideration. The look one gives to a loyal pet. You were safe, you were dependable, and you were utterly, hopelessly neutered. She didn't break your heart. She exposed the fatal flaw in your psychological operating system. The belief that desire can be negotiated through submission. You were playing checkers while she was playing a far older, more ruthless game of chess, and your king had been in checkmate from the very first move. The pain you feel now is not the pain of loss. It is the agonizing pain of self-betrayal. The realization that you willingly handed over the keys to your own emotional state to someone who saw them as nothing more than a trinket. The question that haunts you is not, "Why doesn't she want me?" The real question, the one that should burn in your mind, is, "Why did I ever believe my value was something for her to decide?" We are not here to win her back. That is a loser's game, an attempt to reclaim territory that was never truly yours. We are here to undertake a far more profound and permanent transformation, to forge a self so strong, so centered, so sovereign, that her validation becomes as irrelevant as a whisper in a hurricane. This is not about getting the girl. This is about reclaiming the man you were meant to be before the world taught you to be nice. Before we dismantle the psychological prison she built and you maintain, there is a necessary protocol. This is your first act of defiance against the weakness that has defined you. Subscribe to Dominio Psicologico. This is not a channel. It is an armory for the mind. Activate all notifications, because the war for your sovereignty is fought daily. Like this video, not for an algorithm, but as a signal to yourself that your training begins now. And in the comments below, I demand your battlefield report. Declare the city or country you are watching from. And then, confess the one moment of disrespect that finally shattered your illusions. Let the world know where a new warrior has just been born. Let us begin the autopsy. The subject of our examination is your authority, and the cause of death was a slow, self-administered poison. This was not a sudden assassination. It was a gradual decay, a systemic failure you not only permitted, but actively facilitated. You believe she put you in the friend zone, a fatal misreading of the situation. Friend zone is not a place she puts you. It is the refugee camp you flee to after surrendering your own kingdom. We must dissect this surrender, piece by piece. You can see the precise moments where you traded your sovereignty for the hollow promise of her affection. This is the cold diagnosis of your fall from power. The first stage of your capitulation was emotion. It began subtly. It always does. It was the moment you prioritized her emotional comfort over your own. Remember that time she asked for your opinion on her ridiculously expensive dress? You knew it was a waste of money, a fleeting purchase to fill an emotional void. Your rational mind, the strategist within, identified it as a poor decision. But you said, "It looks amazing on you." You didn't just lie. You actively validated a weakness. You rewarded poor impulse control. In that moment, you taught her that your opinion was not a source of objective truth, but a tool for her emotional regulation. You became a mirror, reflecting back whatever image she wanted to see, instead of a compass, pointing towards true north. Arthur Schopenhauer observed that the world is a representation of our will. When you subordinate your perception of reality to hers, you are effectively erasing your own will from the equation. You cease to be an independent entity coexisting with her and become a mere extension of her own desires and insecurities. This pattern repeated itself endlessly. She complained about a colleague at work. You knew she was partially at fault, that her own lack of discipline contributed to the conflict. But you sided with her unconditionally. You said, "You're right, he's a jerk." You sacrificed an opportunity to offer genuine, strengthening counsel for a fleeting moment of being her ally. You weren't an ally. You were an enabler, an accomplice in her own self-deception. Each emotional concession was a small test. She presented a fragile, often irrational emotional state. She was testing to see if you had the strength to stand apart from it, to maintain your own frame, or if you would dissolve into her reality. She won. You thought you were being empathetic, kind, and supportive. What you were actually communicating was that your internal reality was negotiable. You signaled that her feelings held more authority than objective facts, and a woman, on a primal, instinctual level, cannot respect a man whose reality is so easily conquered. She is drawn to a man who is a rock, a fixed point in the chaos of her own emotional world, not a man who is a puddle that takes the shape of whatever container she pours him into. This led directly to the second phase, the loss of control. Having established that her emotional state dictated your reality, the next step was to see if it could dictate your actions. Control is not about grand gestures. It is about the subtle management of time and resources. Your time is your most valuable, non-renewable resource. It is the currency of your life, the tangible representation of your ambition and purpose. When you began sacrificing your time on the altar of her whims, you entered a state of irreversible decline. It started with a text message. "Can you come over? I had a bad day." You were in the middle of a project. You were at the gym, working on your own physical armor. You had plans that were important to your mission. But you dropped everything. You told yourself it was a noble sacrifice, a demonstration of your commitment. The message she received was entirely different. She learned that her minor emotional turbulence was more important than your life's work. She learned that your boundaries were not walls, but chalk lines she could scuff away with a single, casual request. You were no longer the commander of your own time. You were a soldier on permanent standby, waiting for her summons. Schopenhauer wrote extensively on the misery that comes from being governed by the will of others. He saw freedom as the highest good, achievable only through the mastery of one's own impulses and a detachment from the chaotic desires of the world. By ceding control of your schedule, you were voluntarily putting on the shackles he warned against. You were sacrificing your freedom not for a noble cause, but for the mere possibility of approval. Each time she was late and you waited without comment, you lost control. Each time you changed your plans to fit her last-minute, spontaneous idea, you lost control. Each time you let her interrupt you while you were speaking, you lost control. These were not isolated incidents. They were strategic defeats on the battlefield of respect. She was conducting reconnaissance, probing your defenses, and she found none. You presented an undefended border, and she, following the natural law of power dynamics, simply walked in and occupied the territory. You thought you were being flexible and easygoing. She saw you as formless and without a core. A man has no mission that takes precedence over a woman's moods. He ceases to be a man in her eyes. He becomes an object, a convenience. You cannot desire a convenience. You can only use it. Once your reality and your actions were under her influence, you slid helplessly into the third stage, the desperate search for validation. At this point, your self-worth was no longer an internal state. It was a commodity that only she could provide. Your psychological center of gravity had shifted from inside yourself to inside her. Her attention became your oxygen. Her approval became your food. This is the stage where your phone becomes both a temple and a torture device. You'd post a story on social media, not to share an experience, but with the specific, targeted hope that she would see it. You would then neurotically check the viewer list, and a small hit of dopamine would fire if her name was there. If it wasn't, a wave of anxiety would wash over you. Her silence was dominance, not inattention. By not responding, she was conditioning you, training you like a lab rat to crave the pellet of her acknowledgement. You would craft the perfect text message, rewriting it a dozen times, agonizing over every word and comma, trying to engineer the perfect response. Then you would wait. The minutes would stretch into hours. You'd see the read receipt, and the silence that followed was a deafening roar of your own insignificance. You were living in a state of perpetual, low-grade panic, your emotional stability entirely dependent on a notification from her. Schopenhauer would have diagnosed this as the ultimate form of slavery. Your will, the fundamental driving force of your being, was no longer directed towards your own life, your own growth, your own purpose. It was entirely hijacked, pointed like a weapon at a single obsessive goal, extracting a sign of value from her. You started asking for her opinion on everything: what shirt you should wear, what movie you should watch, what career path you should take. You weren't seeking advice, you were begging for her investment. You believed that if you incorporated her opinions into your life, she would feel a sense of ownership over you, and that this ownership would blossom into affection. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. She didn't feel ownership, she felt burdened. You were not a partner to be respected, but a project to be managed. You abdicated the throne of your own life and then begged her to be your queen. No queen is attracted to a king who won't even rule his own kingdom. She is attracted to the king of a neighboring powerful empire, one she might want to merge with, not one who hands her a tarnished, empty crown and asks her to fix it. The descent accelerates into the fourth circle of this inferno: affective dependency. Here, your entire emotional landscape is terraformed by her. Good morning text from her means you have a good day. Silence from her means you are filled with a gnawing dread. Your moods are no longer your own. They are a direct reflection of the attention she grants or withholds. This is where you become predictable, and predictability is the assassin of attraction. She knew with absolute certainty that if she was feeling lonely at 2 a.m., she could text you and you would respond, eager and available. She knew that if she needed an ego boost, she could give you a meaningless compliment and watch you light up like a child on Christmas morning. You became her emotional utility. You were the safe bet, the guaranteed source of validation she could turn to when the men who actually challenged her, the men who were unpredictable and had their own sovereign frames, were unavailable. You were not her priority. You were her insurance policy. You listened for hours as she complained about these other men, the ones who didn't text back immediately, the ones who had their own busy lives, the ones who weren't afraid to disagree with her. And you, in your tragic delusion, thought, I can be better than them. I will give her the stability they don't. You failed to understand the brutal truth. She was complaining about them, but she was thinking about them. They occupied real estate in her mind because they were a challenge. You, on the other hand, were just the compliant janitor who listened to her talk about the building's important tenants. Schopenhauer's philosophy posits that suffering arises from unfulfilled desire. By making her your sole object of desire, you created a system of guaranteed perpetual suffering for yourself. Your happiness was an outsourced contract, and she was an unreliable supplier. The man who is the master of his own emotional state is a source of immense power. He is a lighthouse. His emotions are generated internally by his mission, his principles, his discipline. The dependent man is a flickering candle, susceptible to being extinguished by the slightest breeze of her indifference. You did not just give her the power to make you happy. You gave her the far greater power to make you miserable. Power, once ceded, is rarely given back voluntarily. The final, pathetic act in this tragedy is the breaking of silence. This is the moment the dam of your feigned nonchalance finally bursts, and a torrent of needy, desperate emotion floods out. It is the culmination of all your strategic errors. After weeks or months of swallowing your frustration, of pretending to be the cool guy who is perfectly fine with being a platonic utility, you crack. It might come in the form of a long, multi-paragraph text message in the middle of the night, confessing your feelings. It might be a drunken, bitter confrontation where you ask, "After everything I've done for you, why don't you see me?" This is the moment you lay all your cards on the table, revealing a hand full of nothing but desperate pleas. You think this is a moment of profound, honest vulnerability. To her, it is the final confirmation of your weakness. You are not a man expressing his desire from a position of strength. You are a beggar pleading for scraps from a position of utter destitution. When you demanded to know why she didn't want you, you weren't asking a question. You were making a final, formal declaration of your own low status. You confirmed that your kindness and support were never genuine. They were a covert contract. They were a transactional strategy, and a poorly executed one at that. You were essentially saying, "I performed all these services for you, and now you owe me affection and intimacy." This is the psychology of a subordinate, not an equal. When you asked for forgiveness for being too intense, when you apologized for the outburst, you signed your unconditional surrender. You apologized for having a spine, for finally expressing a boundary, however clumsily. You proved to her that even your anger was weak and easily pacified. You revealed yourself not as a stoic warrior, but as a petulant child who, after a tantrum, immediately seeks the reassurance of his mother. No one is coming to save you. Especially not the woman who has just witnessed the complete collapse of your frame. She doesn't feel sympathy. She feels a mixture of pity and contempt is the grave where all attraction goes to die. She tested you and you failed. Not just in that final moment, but in the hundreds of small failures that preceded it. Many of you listening to this will raise objections. But isn't it good to be nice? Isn't compromising a part of any relationship? This is the logic of the lamb convincing itself that the butcher's knife is a tool for exfoliation. Let's dismantle this flawed reasoning with brutal clarity. Niceness without strength is not a virtue. It is a profound liability. It is a signal to the world that you are a resource to be exploited, not a force to be respected. Compromise is indeed necessary between two sovereign powers, two kings negotiating a treaty at their shared border. But what you were doing was not compromise. It was appeasement. It was the act of a conquered territory willingly giving up its resources in the hope that the occupying force will be benevolent. She was not your equal. She was your conqueror, and you handed her the keys to the city. You might think, "I was just being myself. I'm an emotional person." Being yourself is not an excuse for strategic incompetence. If yourself is a man with no boundaries, no mission, and no internal source of validation, then yourself is fundamentally unattractive. The mission is not to be yourself. The mission is to forge a self that is worthy of respect. Self that is strong, centered, and sovereign. The fall is never visible. It happens in the silence of you not speaking your mind. It happens in the hesitation before you enforce a boundary. It happens in the yes you utter out of fear of her disapproval, when your entire being is screaming no. The decay was internal long before it manifested externally. Before you can even think about rebuilding, you must sign a new Declaration of Independence. This is your first official act in the war to reclaim your mind. Subscribe to Dominio Psicologico. This is not a request. It is a command to arm yourself. Activate all notifications, because every lesson is a weapon you cannot afford to miss. Like this video as a symbolic gesture, a digital signature on the contract you are making with yourself that will never again be a willing participant in its own domain. Now, you must report from the front lines. In the comments, I want you to answer this, and be ruthlessly honest. What was the one reasonable request she made? The one small compromise you agreed to, that you now recognize as the first time you sold a piece of your sovereignty for nothing? Acknowledge the beginning of your own downfall. This is the first step to ensuring it never happens again. There is no going back for the weak. Let that statement sink into your bones. No path of return for the man you were. That man is a casualty of war, a monument to a failed strategy. Any attempt to resurrect him, to win her back, is an act of profound self-destruction. It is an attempt to re-enter a burning building to save an ash portrait of your own servitude. We are not here to salvage the ruins. We are here to raze them to the ground and build a fortress on the salted earth where your weakness once stood. The reconstruction is not an emotional journey of healing. It is a cold, tactical operation. Your feelings are irrelevant. They are battlefield noise, the screams of a dying army you must learn to ignore. Your new commanders are discipline, silence, and strategy. Your first orders have been issued. First command, cut the excess. This is the strategic withdrawal. You will sever all lines of communication, immediately and without explanation. This is not a dramatic tantrum. It is the silent, deliberate move of a general repositioning his forces. You will disappear from her digital life. No more viewing her stories. No more liking her posts. No more being the first name on her list of orbiting satellites. You will block her. Not out of anger, but out of a sterile, strategic necessity. You are amputating a gangrenous limb before the infection spreads to the heart of your new mission. She has been feeding on your attention for months, perhaps years. It has been a steady, reliable source of energy for her, a utility as predictable as the electricity in her home. Your first move is to cut the power, plunge her into darkness. The sudden, unexplained absence of your energy will create a vacuum, a void that her other, weaker sources of validation cannot fill. She will notice, not because she loves you, but because her ecosystem has been disrupted. An asset has vanished from her portfolio. This initial shock is crucial. It is the first time you are communicating not with words, but with the deafening roar of your absence. You will be tempted to explain, to send a final text declaring your newfound independence. Do not. An explanation is a plea for understanding. It is a request for her to approve of your decision to leave. You do not need her permission to reclaim your own life. The king does not send a memo to the court jester announcing he is retaking his throne. He simply walks in, sits down, and the silence that follows is his decree. Be an absence that carries weight, not a presence that begs. Second command, install the silence. After a period of your complete withdrawal, days, perhaps weeks, she will likely send a probe. It will be a casual, low-investment text. Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. Is everything okay? Or a meme, or a reference to an inside joke. This is not a gesture of genuine concern. This is a reconnaissance mission. It is a ping sent into the void to see if the old system is still online. She is checking if her emotional utility can be reactivated with a simple push of a button. Your response to this probe will determine the entire outcome of this war. Any reply, a friendly one, an angry one, a cold one, is a failure. A reply signals that you are still on her frequency. It confirms that her signal can still reach you, that you are still monitoring her channel. The only correct response is silence, a deep, abyssal, and complete silence. This silence is not passive. It is a weapon. It is a shield that deflects her influence and a statement of your new reality. Your silence communicates more powerfully than any words ever could. It says, your communications are no longer a priority. Your emotional state is no longer my concern. My world has continued to turn, and in fact, it turns faster and with more purpose, now that it is free of your gravitational pull. You must understand the power you wield by not responding. In that moment, the dynamic of power is inverted. She, who was accustomed to your instant replies, is now the one left waiting. She is the one checking her phone. She is the one experiencing the anxiety of the read receipt with no response. You are now the one controlling the flow of information, and you have chosen to shut down the dam completely. Do not reconquer. Replace with a sharper silence. This silence is your new territory, your sovereign ground. It is where you cultivate your strength, far from the distracting noise of her attempts to pull you back into her orbit. Third command, control the reaction. This is the internal war. Your mind, conditioned by months of seeking her approval, will scream in protest. Your addiction to her validation will manifest as intense anxiety. You will craft 100 different replies in your head. You will rationalize why just one short, cold text is a good idea. This is the weak man trying to claw his way out of his grave. You must kill him, again and again, every hour of every day. This is where the wisdom of Schopenhauer becomes not a philosophical concept, but a survival manual. He wrote, "What people commonly call fate is mostly their own stupid doings." Your previous fate was a direct result of your own stupid, emotionally incontinent actions. Your new fate will be forged by your ability to master your own internal reaction. You must view your emotions as a traitorous subordinate that must be brought to heel. Feel the urge to check her social media, you will go to the gym instead. When you feel the loneliness creep in, you will work on your business plan or learn a new skill. You will transmute the base metal of your emotional neediness into the gold of self-improvement. Every pang of anxiety you feel is a signal that the conditioning is being broken. You must learn to welcome that pain as a sign of progress, like the burn in your muscles during a heavy lift. It is the feeling of weakness leaving the body. This is a period of monastic discipline. Your life is now a training camp, and you are preparing for a war that has already begun. The enemy is the man you used to be. Show him no mercy. This brings us to the grand strategy, the construction of your new empire. Previous commands were defensive maneuvers designed to create a secure perimeter. Now you begin the offensive. Your focus shifts entirely away from her and onto the 4 pillars of hierarchical power. This is not about becoming a better man, for her. This is about becoming a superior man, period. Her opinion of the process is utterly irrelevant. The first pillar is the physical. Your body is your armor and your vessel. You will transform it. This is non-negotiable. You will train with religious intensity, not to look good in a selfie, but to forge discipline, to feel the visceral reality of your own power. You will eat with purpose, fueling your body for performance, not for comfort. When you walk into a room, your physical presence must be an undeniable statement of your discipline before you even speak. This physical transformation has profound psychological effects. It builds a foundation of self-respect that is earned through sweat and pain, a respect that cannot be granted or taken away by anyone else. The second pillar is the financial. Money is the great liberator. It is a tool of power and a source of freedom. You will become obsessed with your financial sovereignty. Every dollar you once thought of spending to impress her, you will now invest in yourself, in books, in courses, in assets. You will focus on your career or business with a ruthless, single-minded ambition. Your goal is to build a life of such abundance that the idea of needing a woman for fulfillment becomes laughable. You are not building wealth to attract women. You are building wealth because that is what a king does. He fortifies his kingdom's treasury. The third pillar is the social. You will conduct a brutal audit of your social circle. The friends who encouraged your weakness, the ones who told you to just tell her how you feel, are liabilities. They must be demoted or excised. You will actively seek out the company of men who are stronger, richer, and more disciplined than you are. You will surround yourself with winners, with men whose ambition challenges you and whose success inspires you. Your social value is a direct reflection of the company you keep. Stop being the therapist for your friends' problems and start being the man whose plans and actions they discuss with respect. The fourth pillar is the symbolic. This is your mission, your purpose. What is the great work of your life? What is the legacy you will build? A man without a mission is a ship without a rudder, tossed about by the whims of every passing wave. She became your mission, and that is why you capsized. Your true mission must be something vast, something challenging, something that consumes you. Whether it's building a company, mastering a martial art, or creating a work of art, it must be yours. This purpose becomes your true north, the source of your internal validation. A man who is deeply engaged in his mission radiates an energy that is intensely attractive. He doesn't have time for games or drama because he is playing a much bigger game, and the prize is his own self-realization. A man who wants to be loved will be discarded. A man who imposes his presence will be feared. And fear, in this context, is the primal, instinctual respect for a man who is a force of nature, governed only by his own will. This is the plan. It is not a hope. It is a sequence of tactical operations. Her eventual reaction to this transformation is a secondary consequence, not the goal. She may come back, drawn by the undeniable power of the new man you have become. She may be confused, intimidated, or even angered by your indifference. It does not matter. By the time you have truly forged this new self, her return will be of little consequence. You will have replaced the desperate need for her with the unshakable certainty of your own value. You will have built a kingdom so vast and a throne so high that her validation is nothing but a distant echo from a world you no longer inhabit. Work begins now, not tomorrow. This is your moment of decision. Will you remain a ghost haunting the ruins of your past, or will you become the architect of your future empire? The choice requires a public declaration. Subscribe to Dominio Psicologico and activate all notifications. Consider this your official enlistment in the war against your own weakness. Like this video as a formal acknowledgement of your orders. And in the comments below, you will make your first strategic report. Of the 4 pillars of power, physical, financial, social, and symbolic, which one have you neglected the most, and what is the first tactical action you will take within the next 24 hours to begin its fortification? Your public declaration is your first act of accountability. The world is now watching. Do not fail. The silence you have cultivated is not an empty space. It is a territory. It is a kingdom you have built brick by brick with every unanswered text, with every moment you chose your mission over her memory. And into this silent kingdom, the ghost of your past will inevitably try to return. She will come back. Not with a declaration of love, but with a probe, a casual text designed to test the walls of your new reality. Thinking of you, it might say. Or, remember that time we... It is a key offered to the lock of your old self, a test to see if the door will still swing open on its well-oiled hinges of neediness. The man you were would have seen this as a victory, a sign that his strategy of absence had worked. He would have felt a surge of adrenaline, a desperate hope that this was his second chance. But you are not that man. That man is dead, and you are standing on his grave. Her message is not an opportunity. It is the final exam. It is the last test from the universe to see if your transformation is real or merely a costume. Your response will be the proof. You will not ignore it this time. To ignore it would be to hide, to imply that her message still holds power over you, that you fear engagement. No, final stage of dominance is not avoidance. It is indifferent engagement. You will not for a strategic number of hours, but until her message becomes a low-priority administrative task on your to-do list, somewhere between picking up dry cleaning and answering a mundane work email. And then you will respond. Your reply will be a masterpiece of cold, surgical precision. It will be polite, but devoid of warmth. It will be brief, but not rude. It will be a gray rock. Hope you're doing well. No questions, no openings for further conversation. No emotional hooks. It is a closed door, but one that you are not afraid to stand in front of. You are not hiding from her. You are simply showing her that there is nothing for her here anymore. She will be confused. Her entire operational model was based on your predictable emotional responses. Your indifference is a variable she cannot compute. So she will escalate. She will propose a meeting. Let's grab a coffee for old time's sake. This is the moment of truth. The old you would have dropped everything, his heart pounding, his mind racing with possibilities. You will look at your calendar. A calendar now filled with the architecture of your new life, your workouts, your business meetings, your study sessions. You will see her request not as a date, but as an intrusion, a low-value proposition attempting to occupy a high-value time slot. And you will not with an excuse, but with a statement of fact. I appreciate the offer, but my schedule is committed. You will not offer an alternative time. You will not say maybe some other time. You are not postponing the meeting. You are dismissing the possibility. In that moment, the entire power dynamic that defined your past relationship is not just inverted. It is annihilated. You are no longer the man begging for scraps of her time. You are the man whose time is a scarce and valuable resource, and she does not have the currency to afford it. This is the cold, unexpected resolution. The story does not end with you getting the girl. It ends with you outgrowing the need for her validation entirely. The cliffhanger from the beginning was your agonizing question: why doesn't she want me? The resolution is the profound, liberating realization that you no longer care about the answer. The question itself has become meaningless. It is like a child asking why he can't fly by flapping his arms. The grown man doesn't seek the answer. He builds an airplane. You have stopped asking for permission to enter her world and have instead become the creator of your own. Arthur Schopenhauer argued that the will to live is a blind, striving force that leads to suffering. You have transcended that base will. Your will is no longer directed at possessing her, but at mastering yourself. Her renewed interest, that spark of intrigue in her eyes when she realizes she has no power over you, is not a prize. It is merely a data point, a confirmation that your new operating system is functioning flawlessly. You have not flipped the chessboard. Flipping the board is an emotional act, a tantrum that acknowledges the game still matters. You have done something far more profound. You have simply stood up and walked away from the table, not because you were losing, but because you realized you were playing for stakes that were far too small. Your legacy is not defined by her regret. Her regret is her prison, not your trophy. Your legacy is the empire you build in your own silence, the strength you forge in your own discipline, the freedom you seize through your own indifference. Respect is never negotiated. It is never requested. It is the silent, unavoidable consequence of power. It is the tax that reality levies on a man of substance. You don't demand it. You simply exist, and the world adjusts. She will watch you from a distance, through the curated windows of social media or the whispers of mutual friends. She will see the physical transformation, the financial success, the social gravitas, and she will not understand. She will think she made a mistake. She will believe she let a great man get away. The final brutal truth is that she never had you in the first place. The man she knew was a ghost, a hollow shell animated by the desperate need for her approval. The man you have become was forged in the fire of her rejection, a fire she lit but can no longer control. The war is over, not because you won her back, but because you conquered your. The peace you now feel is not the warmth of her affection, but the cold, hard certainty of your own sovereignty. You are the king of a kingdom of one, and its borders are absolute. This is the final command. If you are ready to abandon the battlefield of her approval and begin the conquest of your own potential, then subscribe to Dominio Psicologico. This is your enlistment. Activate all notifications, because every piece of intelligence is vital. Like this video, not as a request but as a public declaration that the weak man you were is now permanently deceased. And in the comments below, answer this final question. It is not a question for me. It is a contract with yourself. What is the one thing you did for her that you will now do for yourself, with twice the dedication? Declare. Let the world witness the moment you redirected your life's energy from her altar to your own throne. The day she begins to wonder what you're up to is the day she becomes irrelevant.